Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Mental Training Thursday. I want to just remind everyone that we are connecting from Mental Monday or Mental Lift Monday. The topic today is emotional agility for performance and life. And so to kick us off, we do have a question from a student athlete from last week. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris.
Question we were posed with. I'm glad that I'm not the only one who is struggling to train and compete during this semester, but dealing with the feelings is really hard. I can't show them at practice or even with my friends because they'll think I'm weak. What's the point of turning towards what I feel when I feel like there's no space to feel them?
Yes, so as always, I think we just want to thank the student athlete for writing this in. This is so common. I think that especially in our society, but even more so in sport, there's these messages that we can't have our feelings in order to perform at our best. And so I think before diving deeper into this question, I think it's really important for us to understand where these messages come from. And it could look different for every single person. And so is it a dominant culture message? You know, in our society, I think there's a lot of messages about what it means to feel certain emotions, or certain people can feel emotions and other people aren't allowed to. Also, the sport environment, I think, depending on the sport and gender can play a role. I think that there's different messages that come up. Also, family messages. So thinking about your family of origin and growing up, where there's certain emotions that were more acceptable to feel and maybe some that were not acceptable to feel. And so I think these are just some questions to start to ask yourself when you have that feeling of, okay, I have all these emotions, but I don't know how to express them, especially in a sports setting. Kind of what I was wanting to touch on a little bit of, like, gender, does that play a role in it? I know for a lot of people who identify as male, anger may be the only acceptable emotion, maybe in their family or especially in our society, that we're told is okay to show. Also, females, I think that a lot of the time it's like, okay, I can be emotional, but don't be too emotional because you might be seen as out of control. And so these are just some questions to start to ask yourself around, okay, why am I having a hard time allowing myself to feel certain emotions? So I think that once we understand these messages, the next part is recognizing, how do you typically respond to emotions that feel uncomfortable? And so let's say you're at training and you notice an emotion coming up, really just being able to take a pause of, like, hey, what's going on for me? What am I wanting to do right now? And on our Mental Lift Monday, we talked about different pitfalls. So I just want to highlight some of those. So one of the big ones that I know we talk to people about a lot is avoidance. This is a common reaction for most people. And so there's different ways that we avoid emotions, because nobody wants to feel uncomfortable. And so a lot of the time it can show up as numbing. So we can numb through substance use, we can numb through food, we can numb through exercise, social media, shopping, relationships. There are so many ways that humans find to numb ourselves just so that we don't have to fully feel what is coming up for us. So that might be one. And so really trying to pay attention of, like, okay, when my emotions come up, do I do something to try to avoid feeling that way? The other one that is very common is judging. So a lot of the time we'll judge ourselves for even just feeling emotions. And so kind of back to the messages we get, a lot of the time in sport, the message is, if you have any emotion outside of anger or whatever it might be, that's weak. And so if you're judging yourself for feeling a certain way or telling yourself that you're weak, that could be a piece that you're struggling with, the judging piece. And then the last pitfall, or one of the last pitfalls, I should say, is the stewing piece. And so one thing that I often tell people is, I really want you to experience your emotions, I don't want you to live in them. And there's a difference, because if we're fully in that emotion and not allowing ourselves to be in the present moment, we're really living in it, and we're not able to move through that emotion. And so that shows up a lot if we're just sitting there stewing in our emotions. So those are 3 of the pitfalls that we wanted to talk about. One thing that I really want to bring up today is this mentality of both and. So a lot of the time, our brains want to go into like the either or cycle. And so it's like, either I can have emotions or I can be the best athlete I can be. There's no in between. It's one or the other. And so this idea of both and is really important. So I can have emotions and I can perform at my best. And so in order to do that, we first need to acknowledge our emotions, figure out, okay, what am I telling myself about these emotions, and how can I release them in a healthy way, depending on the environment I'm in. So especially when we're talking about sport, it's how can you channel them out on the field or the court or the track in a way that's healthy for you, that can actually help you perform better. So I'm going to turn it over to Bob and see what his thoughts are.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Erin. And thank you to the student athlete who reached out and asked this question. I want to jump in on that both and response, because I think that's really where we're going to go today, both in our experiential activity and how we're thinking about this idea of emotional agility over the next few weeks. The fact is, feelings are going to show up, and period. And I think they get a bad rap. We always say, they shouldn't be here, they're good or bad, but feelings are feelings. And what we do with them, we can kind of judge, hey, is this closer to my values and what I need, or is this taking me away from that? And so today, I think where we wanted to start, Erin and I wanted to start, is really starting to clear away some of these roadblocks that show up for us around emotions that get in the way. So if we use a little bit of our metaphor from week 2, our GPS system internally is kind of connecting us in the direction of the values we have in our sport. Like, what do we want to stand for in our sport and our life? And in many ways, some of these roadblocks that show up, these messages and myths we get from dominant culture, from maybe our sport team environment, from our families around what's okay to feel and not, they can mess with the GPS system. It's like the satellite goes out for a second and we don't know how to really work with that. And so what we're going to do today is try to clear away some of the roadblocks so we can get a clean signal for what's coming up this week. And then moving forward, we're going to work on, okay, what do we do with that when it shows up for us? So we're going to dive kind of right into this. For this activity, really calling it just clearing away roadblocks for a clean emotional signal. If you're comfortable, if you're doing this in your own room, your own space, and closing your eyes, go ahead and do that now. Or you can, find a point to look at in the ground ahead of you, or somewhere in the room or the space you're in. And one of the ways we can get really clear about what's going on for us internally is to again and again come back into our body. So that's what we're going to start. So really just finding a posture that's upright yet relaxed. Taking a few deep breaths to help you settle in at your own pace. Just feel any sensations of weight or gravity in your body. Just the sense of your whole body sitting. Contact where you're sitting, the warmth or coolness you feel. Letting your attention just rest with being connected right now in this moment to where you sit. Just anchoring your awareness here. in the downward force of gravity and just being held up. And we're just going to do kind of a quick little scan of the body. So starting at the tip of the head, down to the eyes, the nose, the mouth, back of the head. And as you scan, just noticing any sensations, warmth or coolness, tingling, pulsing, heaviness. Now resting your attention in the shoulders, the upper arms, the hands, the tips of the fingers. Now into the heart region, the upper back, into the diaphragm, the core, and the lower back. Just being with yourself, just as you are. And that's enough. So typically emotions have a, cognitive part of them. There's a, image, a memory, an event that occurs and how we're making sense of it, and a physical part. So the physical sensation shows up anywhere from kind of our top of our heads down to our gut. We're just centering on this area. And from this place, let's just investigate any roadblocks for us. Part of developing a wise relationship, just becoming aware of the notions we carry about feelings. So just asking yourself, what messages did you receive from your family, culture, religion, society? What messages did you receive even today through the media around what's okay to feel, what's not okay to feel? In what ways have you felt policed or shut down around what's allowed? And now noticing, returning back to the body, returning back to just what do you notice when you bring to mind these roadblocks? Is there more tension, constriction, heaviness? Where are you noticing it in your body that you're storing? Maybe that reaction to how you feel from the outside world. And just gently holding that area, maybe softening around it, breathing into it. And before we close, just dropping in what really matters. So what messages about this feeling actually serve you? What, do you want to be the messages that you give yourself? And how do you want to be with that feeling when it shows up this week? And most importantly, some environments, depending on our identities, depending on the power dynamics, don't feel safe and secure to fully be with what shows up. So just naming for yourself, imagining, what environments can I move into that allow me to be with what's here? So before we end, just a little nudge, remain curious to those roadblocks in the week ahead by dropping into the body, clearing away, finding that signal of what's showing up for what you need and what matters most this week. Taking maybe one more full breath. And if your eyes have been closed, you can open them and we'll jump back into our conversation.
Thanks, Bob. I know as I went through that exercise, one thing that popped up for me was even just reminding ourselves that our emotions don't go anywhere if we don't acknowledge them. So it's not like, oh, if I numb it or if I avoid it, it's going to go away. It actually can get stronger and stronger. And so I think that just in terms of being an athlete, by allowing yourself to really get in touch with that and acknowledge it, you can actually be more powerful in whatever sport it is that you're playing. And so thank you, Bob. I appreciate you guiding us through that exercise. So thank you all for joining us today. Please join us next week for this as well. And we'll just continue building off of this week and training our resilience throughout the next few weeks. So if you do have any questions, please reach out to Bob at robert.deal@colorado.edu. And then we'll take the first few minutes answering the questions and going from there. So thank you all. And then the last thing I did want to leave you with is a quote. So this is from James Baldwin. So I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hate so stubbornly is because they sense once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with their pain. So thank you all, and we will see you next week.